good. We got a good group this morning. We've been doing the summer, we've been talking about different pieces or parts of the church, and today we're going to talk about bells. Does anybody know how bells came to be in the church? Does anybody out here know how bells came to be in the church? Okay, that's better. Does anybody know where it talks about bells in the Bible? That's okay. Actually, the first place in the Bible the bells are mentioned is in Exodus. And it's pretty much the same wording is found in both Exodus 28, 33 through 35, and in Exodus 39, 25 to 26. And it is when they were making priestly garments, they were required along the hem of the garment to place a pomegranate, then a bell, then a pomegranate, then a bell, all the way around. And the reason was because those bells tinkled. Aaron was the first priest when he went into the temple, and everybody knew he was in the presence of God. And then later, in Zechariah 14:20, they had to inscribe on the bells that the horses wore that holy to the Lord. Whether the horses were holy to the Lord or the bells were holy to the Lord, I'm not sure, but those are two places in the Bible that bells are mentioned. So, with that in mind, the first bells that we ever know of were made about 7,000 years ago, and they were made in China, but they weren't rung by hand. They were shaped like most bells, some with lips and some without the lips, and they hit them with hammers. They hung them on wooden beams or metal beams, and then they would strike them, and they were all tuned. And from there, they traveled westward, and then first to Africa, and then they traveled up to Europe. And when they got to Europe, a lot of things with handbells changed. First, they had the tower bells. Tower bells are the ones that you see in some churches. They've got a belfry up there, and they're bells, and they're hanging. But to ring them, back in those days, somebody had to jump up and grab a big rope and pull on it for that bell to ring. And in England, it got to the point where, besides ringing bells for church to let people know it's time to come to church, they were rung for other reasons too, for certain events and whatnot. And they got to where they started, when they got more bells, they were tuned to different pitches, and they started to ring bell peals, which are just a mathematical order of ringing the bells. So no bell ever rings in the same place twice in a row. And from there, it got pretty loud when people were ringing these bells during the day. And also in the summer, it was very, very hot up there. And in the winter, it was very, very cold. And it just drove people nuts. And so they decided they needed something to practice on so that they weren't disturbing the public. So first they made wooden bells. And that worked for a while, but then somebody got the idea that, we could make smaller bells that are like the bells in the tower. And that's how handbells originated. And they played them, and because they worked so well, it eventually got to where they weren't doing the bell ringing so much, the peals, that they were just making music with the bells. And so I'm going to show you what the bells look like. Most of you have seen these. We have a 3-octave set of Malmark bells that are made here in Pennsylvania. And this is our biggest bell. But they make bells that are bigger, 2 more octaves down. And we have the upper 2 octaves in addition to this. And that bell, our highest bell is this. and then they make another octave beyond this. So there's eight octaves of bells, well, actually 7.5 right now that are actually in service. They're trying to work to get the bottom half of the lower octave, so there's a full 8 octaves. But right now there's just really 7. But they're all tuned. When you ring a bell, you know, and sound travels. And then you have to damp the sound, or it goes on for quite a while. But if you listen closely, it changes pitch as the sound dies away. And I won't get into all of the rigmarole about all that. We also have hand chimes, which came after the bells. And this is our largest hand chime. And when you get a bunch of hand chimes going, especially the larger ones, they're like 7 feet tall, it can almost sound like an organ is playing. And this is our smallest one. There's quite a difference between those. So we have played handbells in this church since before I came here. They had handbells. And Sue Bradford, you probably know the year maybe that handbells. Dave, do you know the year we got the handbells here in this church? I know we've been here over 20 years, and they were here before we came. Yeah. Yeah. So handbells last a long time if you take care of them. And so that's how churches got handbells, and because God commanded us to have bells. So thank you. Kids, we were going to go back here into the choir room today, and we're going to play with some bells.